Greetings, YouTube. This is going to be a corollary video to my Ultimate Combat review from Pathfinder. As I said in that review, I need to talk a little bit about the weapons and armor. Actually, not so much the armor. I didn't have an issue with the armor. A lot of it is Asian-based, so if you're not using real-world Asian cultures, it's not going to be useful to you. But if you are, it is. So, good for you. Now you've got what you want. But I do have an issue with some of the weapons presented in the game, some of the things about the weapons, and some of the firearm rules. Now, they presented a whole lot of weapons, and once again, as it ever seems to fail me in fantasy games, their weights are whacked. They are way too heavy. And yes, I can hear it now in the comments. People are going to tell me, well, you know, they're talking about encumbrance. Well, if they're talking about encumbrance, then call it encumbrance. When you call it weight, it means the weight of the object. And they have a katana in this book that weighs 6 pounds. That's how much a two-handed sword weighs in the real world. Katana, max 2 pounds. Okay? It's just insane. They have the Tetsubo, and you'll imagine that I find this weapon very interesting. Listed as an exotic two-handed weapon. Does a die 10 by multiplier of critical of multiplier of 4. Okay? That makes sense. It's supposed to hit like a brick for a reason. It's a giant club with metal studs all over it, or a mace, giant mace, depending on how you want to look at it. Now, I have always run them as martial two-handed versions of two-handed swords. So simply use the two-handed sword stats and make it bludgeoning. That's how I've always run great clubs and Tetsubos. Now, I can understand wanting to make it have more oomph. So that's the 4 multiplier, so yeah, that would make it exotic. But I wouldn't make it a die 10. I would make it either a die 12 or a 2 die 6. That's just me, how I do it. Now, the firearms look okay. I didn't have an argument with the way the firearms, as far as ranges and damage potentials and things like that. I would have put in a horse pistol. Now, the horse pistol would essentially be the bastard sword of the pistol set. A pistol this long. Essentially, it's a carbine. Martial weapon, two-handed, one-handed, exotic. Again, the bastard sword concept, like the war axe or the maul, but for a pistol. And the other advantage that you can take it, you flip it around, hold it by the barrel, then you can beat people with it like a mace. So it's a good, overall, you can fire 2 of them, dunk, start beating people with them. Very useful. And I think very appropriate to a fantasy game, particularly to my mind, if you have a 2-weapon fighting. Boom, 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 boom. Really cool. But my major problem with the firearms is their cost for the rounds of the firearms. They have a bullet. Bullet. A musket ball. Okay? Costing 1 gold piece. Now, that's made out of lead. In this supplement, in this book, there is also a spell that will convert 1 pound of lead into either 2 sling bullets, which is correct, because you can buy sling bullets in groups of 10, and that's 5 pounds of lead. So that's correct. They're very consistent there. Or it will produce 30 bullets, which gives you a caliber of .68, the same as a paintball gun. Fits a fantasy world in my book. It's a little big, you know, for maybe the real world and a pistol or something, but I don't have a problem with it. Very appropriate. They like the number 30, I'll go with it. Or it produces 10 handfuls of shot for, a blunderbuss or a dragon pistol, which is essentially a one-handed shotgun. Now, we know that 5 pounds of lead costs 5 silver pieces. 5 silver pieces buys you 10 sling bullets. So 1 silver piece will buy you 2 sling bullets, which means that in the real world, in this game, 1 silver piece will buy you 30 bullets. I'm being completely consistent here. Totally. That's taking manufacturing costs into account. All right? Everything. There is no reason that a bullet costs a gold piece. Now, since 1/30th of a silver piece is kind of bizarre, I would just say copper piece and call it good. Yeah, they're expensive bullets, so they're expensive bullets. All right? But they're not a gold piece for a ball of lead. Now, another thing I do in games is I don't use gunpowder. Gunpowder is a real-world chemical process, and I think handing real-world chemical processes to gamers in a world full of magic is a bad thing, especially if you're playing with engineers. Not safe for a GM. So I use smoke powder, an alchemical substance. I can price it anything I want. Only people who have access to making alchemy substances can make it. I cut down the whole problem right from the get-go with real-world chemical processes hitting my world and being taken over by players. Now, they also present the firearms in 3 different levels. They are exotic weapons if you want them to be very rare. They are martial weapons if you want them to be less rare. Musketeer, 3 Musketeers genre, Pirates of the Caribbean, that kind of thing. And they're an easy, simple weapon if you want them ubiquitous. You know, American, 19th century America, early 20th century, okay? They're everywhere. Now, this makes sense as far as giving the options of 3 different levels of complexity. They also present you with muzzle loading, I'm assuming flint, but I don't think they actually specify, or cartridge. But they completely missed the stuff in the middle, which was the cap and ball period, where you had muzzle loading percussion cap weapons, which are awesome, okay? So I would allow all 3 of those categories of weapons to exist. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I have a problem with making them exotic. Firearms, even early muzzle-loading firearms, are no more complex than heavy crossbows. I'm not talking mechanically as in like the rules mechanics. I'm talking about mechanics in the sense of the item has X number of parts, moves in X number of ways, requires X amount of training to use effectively. And an early firearm is no more complex than a heavy crossbow. Heavy crossbows had gears, folks. Cranks and stuff. They were complex items. And they're simple weapons in D&D or Pathfinder. So I would only ever make firearms martial. Never exotic, except the example I gave of the horse pistol, because it gives you an advantage of having a very powerful one-handed pistol that would normally have to be two-handed because it's so big. They also present modern cartridge firearm, which is cool. If you want to do the Old West thing, right here for you. But one of the bizarre things they present is that paper cartridges. Now, a paper cartridge was just what it sounds like. It was a tube of paper with a ball at the top, a twist, a cylinder at the cylindrical section of paper which had the powder in it, and it pinched off at the end. So the whole thing's about this big. So you take it, bite the end off, pour the gunpowder in there, shove the ball with the ramrod in there, and the paper becomes the wadding for the round. Okay, you want to put the powder in loose so it gets proper contact with your ignition system. You just don't want to shove the whole thing in there sealed. It won't fire properly or at all. For some reason, they seem to think that is more complex and has a higher chance of misfiring than using loose powder in a loose round. No, folks, it's more efficient to have paper cartridges. You have a less problem of having a problem with loading, things like that. It makes no sense. It's a mechanical improvement, and yet for some reason they're punishing you for it. They did add one thing I liked, which was alchemical different rounds, like semi-magical rounds, not quite full-fledged magic items, but things like that would let you to, like additional damage or different damage types to your weapon, and that makes sense that they might have to be more complex because, again, it's an alchemical process. It isn't necessarily perfected. you're fusing that with a new weapon. So yeah, okay, no problem. But paper cartridges all by themselves should not be making things more difficult. They should be streamlining. And the last thing is rapid reload in the standard game. You have to take a different rapid reload feat for every crossbow. That's bull. You take rapid reload crossbow, it works on all crossbows. And in this supplement, you have to take rapid reload firearm for pistols or for muskets or for blunderbusses. That's also bull. You take rapid reload firearms, it works on all firearms. Everything below a cannon. If you can load a pistol quickly, you understand the principle of loading a musket quickly, or the principle of loading a shotgun or a blunderbuss quickly. This is not, physics here. This is not some arcane M theory. This is loading a weapon quickly because you've been properly trained and you've taken the time and effort to focus on how to be really good at loading things very quickly. So don't penalize people just because you want to. Feat taxes are bad. So those are my thoughts concerning the weapons that were presented in the Ultimate Combat supplement. And again, I've run really long and I apologize. I hope that you have a good weekend. And I will hopefully be talking to you folks later today.